Rumpelstiltskin was reading a book on so-called Storybrooke history when his wife returned. It was an interesting piece of fiction, but also useful because it told him where many of the magic relics and ruins, buildings, and objects were found within the city limits. He looked up when the front door swung inwards hard enough to knock against the coat rack, then the hasty way Mary Margaret closed and locked it. She didn't immediately come to the kitchen where the light was still on, or even call out a greeting, which was unusual. He heard the clink of glass on glass and liquid flowing, and frowned. Mary Margaret didn't drink. The only time he had ever seen her drink, if that was even a true memory, was one glass of champagne at their wedding. Before that, the only time she had ever rejected sobriety had been the first night they met, when she all but fell off her bar stool into his lap. He set down the book and went to the kitchen door, opening it a crack. A slice of light cut across the living room, and Mary Margaret spun around as if she were a thief caught in the act, a guilty look on her face. Rumpelstiltskin frowned. "What's wrong, dearie?" She set down the glass she had just drained and rushed across the room towards him. She crashed into him, flinging her arms around him and kissing him. Rumpelstiltskin froze, then caught her by the arms, gently pushing her back. "What brought this on?" he asked, looking at her searchingly. "You were at the hospital. Did something happen?" She clutched at his upper arms, staring at him. "He woke up," she said. "Cam, the coma patient. I was reading to him, and he moved and grabbed my hand, and it's crazy, but Henry said it would happen, and it can't be happening." Rumpelstiltskin hesitated, then carefully embraced her. "Calm down, dearie, calm down," he murmured. He patted her back awkwardly. It had been so long since he had needed to comfort someone, and he knew that even as Margaret Gold that had carried over. "How about we sit you down and you tell me exactly what happened?" It took some negotiation, what with his cane knocked back into the kitchen, but in the end they were sitting in the two armchairs, and Mary Margaret was cradling another glass of his scotch in her shaking hands. It was Henry," she explained haltingly. "We were at the hospital doing the decorations this morning." He nodded. "I recall you mentioning them," he said. Mary Margaret took another drink. "There's a patient. A John Doe. He's been in a coma for as long as I've been helping there. Henry was looking at him." She raised her eyes to his, and to his dismay they were filling with tears. "He thinks the man is Prince Charming. Cam, I only went to read to him because Emma said it would show Henry that the fairy tales don't work here." Rumpelstiltskin stared at her blankly. "Henry found Snow White's Prince Charming," he said. He remembered laughing before his memories ever returned about Henry's book. One thing he had agreed on was that Mary Margaret was the fairest of them all. She had blushed as red as one of Regina's apples. It seemed the boy was much more efficient than he was, and the book was much more useful than it at first sounded. "Cam, I only went because I thought it would help Henry," she said, reaching out to clasp his hand as if he might suspect her. "I didn't think he would wake up. I wasn't there because I thought I would find a true love or something stupid like that." He turned his hand to squeeze her fingers. "Of course you didn't, dearie," he said softly. "I know you were only trying to help the boy." He offered her a quick, small smile. "But who knows? Maybe you do deserve a Prince Charming rather than an old troll like me." "Cam," she protested, sniffling softly. "You're not a troll." He wrinkled his nose the way he knew amused her. "You sure about that, dearie? After all, maybe the reason he can't find me in his books is because I lurked under the bridges in the fairy tale world." Mary Margaret giggled wetly, setting her glass down on the coffee table. She rubbed her eyes. "I know it's silly," she said, looking at him. I just didn't think anything would happen, at all. It was just meant to be reading, and then nothing." Rumpelstiltskin gazed at her. If the man in the hospital was indeed Prince Charming, then things were about to get very complicated indeed. True love would always find a way, and if Mary Margaret and this coma man were indeed the match they had always been, he couldn't help thinking Regina would be up in arms soon. For that reason, Rumpelstiltskin was all the more determined to see Snow White and her prince reunited, their daughter back with them, and their grandson the fairy-tale prince he was destined to be. The sooner that happened, the sooner the curse would break, and the sooner he could be free and on his way to find his own family. He had to see the book. He had to find out what Henry knew, and maybe that was a way to find a way into the curse's loophole. "I know it was only kindness," he said quietly to the woman who was his wife. "Maybe we can go to the hospital tomorrow and see if there's anything we can do to help the man. After all, you've woken him up. It would be inconsiderate to leave him on his own." Mary Margaret blinked at him in surprise, then smiled weakly. "I'd like that," she said. "I'd like it if you came with me, too." Rumpelstiltskin smiled, but she wasn't looking close enough to see it didn't reach his eyes.